Domain and range. Reading domain and range from a graph. So we're going to give definitions for domain and range, determine the domain and range of a graph, and express the domain and range using interval notation. Domain is the set of values for which the function is defined. Usually we call those the x values, and a more commonplace definition might be any input value that gives an output. So any x value that has a y value. So if we look at the example real quick, there are x values that have a point on the graph, starting here and going over, but there are no x values below 0, so we would call the domain here from 0 to infinity. And since that we can take the square root of 0, we include 0, but we never include infinity. The range is the set of all of the output values that result from a function. Usually we just call these the y values. In this case, in this example, the y values start at 0 and then continue upwards. So we say that the range is 0 to infinity as well. So let's take a look at some examples and give the domain and range in interval notation. For example, this parabola, all of the x values can be put into the function, which is x squared. So we would say, if we want to say all x values, we give the domain as negative infinity to positive infinity. And the y values only go from negative 5 up. And since they do hit negative 5, let's use a closed bracket here, and then they go to positive infinity on the other side. A linear graph has all x values and all y values. So the range is negative infinity to positive infinity, and the domain is also negative infinity to positive infinity. This graph, with its asymptotes, can be a little bit tricky at first. So we need to exclude 2 from the domain, because that's where our asymptote is. So we're going to use a union to show that the domain goes from negative infinity to 2. And it also goes from 2 to infinity. Notice that I have the rounded brackets because of the asymptote we never actually hit 2. So on the other side, looking at the range, we go from negative infinity to 0 and from 0 to positive infinity. And if we had, let's say, a segment or a part of a piecewise function, using interval notation, we're going to say the range goes from negative 2 to 4, rounded brackets because of the open hole, and we're going to go from negative 3 to positive 3, rounded brackets. So try this one on your own. What is the domain and range of the following graph? And if you're not familiar with this graph, it does keep oscillating forever. So that should give you a little bit more information about it. And so we could almost think about there being like arrows at the ends, but it doesn't keep going in the same direction. It keeps oscillating back and forth.